If you're going to self-manage your rental properties, you know I'm a big fan of finding that proper tool to get the job done. Well, we want to tell you about RentRedi. RentRedi is a really awesome property management software that allows you to manage your business from your computer or phone. Collect rent online and get paid. Find that perfect tenant with their screening and listing services and get your leases signed with the click of a button. And tenants really love using RentRedi's app too. They can pay rent using card, ACH, or cash, set up autopay, get renter's insurance if you require it, and even build their credit score through RentRedi's new credit reporting feature. Did we also mention that RentRedi is unlimited and all of this is flat priced? No tricks or hidden fees. RentRedi is designed for people to manage their own properties so you don't have to worry about paying more for building your business. You can start managing and scaling your rental properties without scaling costs. And RentRedi has given us an amazing deal to pass on to the REI Mastermind Network. You can get RentRedi's annual plan for only $54 at rentredi.com when you use our special code MASTERMIND. That's rentredi.com, RENTREDI.com with code MASTERMIND, MASTERMIND at rentredi.com to get RentRedi's annual plan for only $54.
You are listening to the REI Mastermind Podcast. Join JD as he chats with industry-leading real estate experts and professionals. We learn from their experience and uncover the strategies to their success that we can implement into our own businesses, and we can drive immediate results today. They share their experience and wisdom as we build the foundation to our own success. This is the REI Mastermind Network.
We have Gabe DeSilva on the call. Gabe this is going to be a treat. We get to talk a little fix and flipping and some other things, but if you haven't heard about Gabe, he is fostering probably the biggest fix and flip community on Facebook that you can find, and there's a ton of great content there. So make sure you look up Fix and Flip Foundation on Facebook, and then you going to go by that moniker even for your training and other things you offer. But really appreciate your time, Gabe. But what is your primary website if people wanted to kind of find a central place for some of your links?
Yeah, the hub is gabedesilva.com, my name, .com, Gabe. And if you go there, you'll find links through to a lot of our stuff, our socials, the free content that we've created over on YouTube. It's all linked there. So that's essentially my hub.
Oh, great. So let's start things off. I really am always curious. How did you start to get into this flipping game? Mm-hmm. And don't tell me it started with HGTV or something.
No, it didn't. I'm one of the few that I started in the trenches. So unlike the HGTV wannabe crowd, right? And I say that from a place of love and compassion. That's not meant to be derogatory. That's how a lot of people get their start. I was of a different ilk. I grew up in the business. So my dad is a first generation builder, started with plumbing, masonry, all that stuff, and worked his way up to building new construction. And so I grew up in and around the business as a kid, kind of looking in over his shoulder as he's reviewing blueprints and making calls and proposals and things like that with vendors. So subconsciously as a kid, you're picking a lot of that stuff up, although you don't realize it. I later go on to have a career in corporate, which absolutely sucked, and transitioned into entrepreneurship in the food space. Did that, loved entrepreneurship, didn't love food, and found myself ultimately in real estate. And we do a lot of different things, but primarily the stuff you're talking about is fix and flip. That's what our core competency is. And again, it kind of ties back to what I grew up in as a kid.
Sure. It's interesting. Like a lot of the people that I run into that do fix and flipping or they aspire to do that, I joked about HGTV and the DIY network and stuff like that, but it does spur a lot of interest in this. Unfortunately, there's a misconception that they can themselves do it in 30 minutes or less.
Yeah.
But what have you been, if somebody was looking to get into fix and flipping for the first time, where would you suggest they begin?
Well, there's so much content, right? Like even us, we have one of the most powerful things I did to kind of combat that was I actually hired a videographer to shadow me for 6 months. And we created a docu-series that shows people, it's free, it's on YouTube, it's called The Build. You can look it up, it's on my channel. And it's 16 episodes and it's the real deal, right? It's not something edited for TV, which, as you guys already know, HGTV and DIY, that's all super edited. The realities of what it takes to do this full time, we did what I think is a really good job of capturing that with our docu-series. And so I send people there all the time. I don't look to monetize on that content. It's there. And when people are new to the game and they don't necessarily have a marketing budget, or if they're just unsure, they're not even sure if this is what they want to do. They want to know, like, is what I see on TV what really happens in the field? The answer is obviously no. But if you want to see what really happens in the field, I send them there. And that's where I like to have people start.
Sure. So, I think a lot of the people, especially when they get into fix and flipping the first time, their natural inclination is to see if they can find anything directly off the MLS. Is that where you're finding your opportunities, or do you house hunt with the yellow letters and a few other things?
So when I started, I've been in this space for 6 years. When I started, you could pick deals off MLS. The competition wasn't as fierce, right? And competition isn't meant to be the way people interpret it, right? Like, it's not a zero-sum game. But I say that only to say, like, early on, it was there and it was easy to find. And, almost despite all your missteps, you could still find opportunities. Here, fast forward to today, especially in the midst of this supply demand, mishap, inequality, we'll call it, right? There just isn't the opportunity. There aren't as many opportunities as there were then. Mm-hmm. So that means that, like, you have to work a little bit harder to find the deal. Not to say they're not still there. They're the exception. If you find a deal listed on MLS, like, that's the exception. The rule is you have to market for your own stuff. You have to go off market. You have to go direct to seller. But again, like, just recently with a handful of my students, we were running into this thing. How do we find deals? How do we find deals? There's no deals, right? I kept getting the same feedback. I said, listen, guys, like, everything works if you work it, right? What worked? Go back to the beginning. What worked then? Try that. And then small pivots, right? So I went in and I mined our local MLS for opportunities and found stuff. There's still stuff there. It's just less of it. So again, I think everything's got to be done in parallel. Don't ever be a one-trick pony. Don't depend solely on MLS. Don't depend solely on organic. Don't depend solely on yellow letters. But, run those things in parallel. So when one's hitting and the other's not, you're still in business.
Mm-hmm. When that's a good advice, especially not relying on one resource. Would you say, though, that it would be good to kind of perfect one of those channels first before you start to diversifying, or do you suggest going 2 or 3 channels right off the bat?
No, so what I actually teach is you need a foundational marketing effort. Whatever that campaign or effort is, that's the foundation upon which the pyramid is built. And usually whatever that thing is, depending on where you're starting, if you don't have a big marketing budget, that thing's not going to be Facebook ads. That thing's not going to be buying off Zbuy or like one of those Hubzu type sites, right? Like, those are things that require a little bit more cash to implement. If you have limited funds on the front end to do your marketing, your stuff's going to be more cold call, like guerrilla style marketing. And then build that foundation with that marketing effort before you start layering on other things. And those other things that you layer on, envision the pyramid. For those that are watching this on video, I'm making a pyramid with my hands. You work your way up to the top of the pyramid where the more costly marketing efforts are. But that baseline, that foundational marketing effort, get that one in place, get that thing working for you. Ours is organic, so it's really no cost. Time, obviously, there's a cost. There's a value for your time. But we do a lot of our organic outreach, and that's our foundational marketing effort. And frankly, it outperforms all our paid stuff 3 to 1 anyway. So if I were to give people any advice with regard to deal flow, to filling the pipeline, it's like, get out there, start networking, start talking to people, start presenting yourself as a home buyer.
Yeah. No, I can't stress that enough. That's another piece of great advice. If anybody would take one piece, I get people asking that all the time, is if they don't have any marketing dollars, where do they begin? Well, the obvious thing is to build that network, join your local networking group, get into the RIAs, and if you don't have a local RIA, start one. I mean, it's amazing how little cost some of that stuff can be for you. And your network, you're not meeting one person, you're meeting one person who happens to know 10 other people or 100 other people. You got to build that network.
Mm-hmm. Start that RIA. Oh, what a powerful piece of advice. If it doesn't already exist in your market, be that guy or gal, be that focal point around which these other folks will gather. That's how massive opportunity will find you. So I love that. I encourage people to do that. If I have students outside of our market, that's where I always tell them to start.
Sure. So, as people are looking at these properties and trying to find the opportunities, this is going to be kind of a pretty deep conversation, what I'm about to ask you next. And before we do, I want to remind everybody to make sure you check out that Fix and Flip Foundation community on Facebook and become a part of that. I think your students are pretty active there, helping each other out too.
Yeah, absolutely. The resource, the value exchange, when you get a bunch of active investors together in a safe space where everybody's kind of working together to lift one another up, you see massive value exchange, resources, and like the stuff we're about to dig into. A lot of it's there, but I'm happy to share here as much as we have time to.
Yeah. So that does lead me into like how people would run their numbers. And this is where I see a lot of first-time fix and flippers really get into some trouble. So how should they run their numbers, and what are some of those things they should account for?
Yeah.
And I know that's a big question, isn't
it? So I'm fortunate in that we work with people all over the country. So I don't have my right when you're the hammer, everything looks like a nail answer for New Jersey where we operate, because that through and through, I know those numbers, right? We've been in this market long enough. I can already look at something and just visually tell what it'll cost. But when I'm working with folks from all around the country, I have to start thinking about what's it look like in their market. And it's drastically different. So what I encourage people to do is, well, from a practical standpoint, it's got to be visually, not just appealing, but you have to be able to look at something and cleanly identify what's what. Like, what are these line items? What are these things going to cost? Like, what are the line items even? So I send folks to a house flipping spreadsheet. It's a big Excel model. He's actually taking it online now. David Robertson built this thing out. He started his business about the same time I started mine. It's an amazing resource. He's a great dude, and he puts this thing together that essentially captures all the costs you could possibly imagine incurring on any rehab. We're talking a cosmetic rehab all the way to a new construction, inclusive of site work. So there you've got your model to work within. That takes a lot of stress off already, because now you know you're working within this one worksheet inside these individual line items. So now what numbers do you populate into those line items to start figuring out your costs? Well, there's a handful of different ways to do that. You want to get super solid numbers. You go local, you go to the groups, right? Our group or one like it, and you just start talking to people in your market who are getting bids right now for the type of stuff you want to have done. And then you ask them to share those numbers with you. That's about as true as it's going to get. But let's say you're doing some front end analysis and you don't necessarily need to get that deep in the weeds. Well, you can go using the data that Dave's built into the house flipping spreadsheet. You can start there, or you can go to I've actually got it behind me for those that are watching and seeing it on video, right? The book on estimating rehab costs by Jay Scott for Bigger Pockets. This thing, we're actually contributors to this book, and we gave Jay a lot of our New Jersey-based numbers, just like other investors did from all around the country. So you can go in here and you can see what it costs to hang a sheet of drywall all over the country, right? Like the numbers are here too. So again, you start with the baseline numbers that are already populated in the worksheet. You tweak them accordingly with the stuff that's in this book that's kind of like geographically appropriate for where you are. And then you want to get even like tighter numbers, start talking to people that are in your market right now doing the thing you're looking to do and ask them what they're getting bid. And that's how you get really good numbers on your stuff. It's, it's not rocket science. And you got to stay on top of this stuff, especially right now. Like at the time of this recording, we're coming out of this like COVID pandemic, dealing with supply chain issues that have driven lumber prices up 300 to 400%. So you need to know like in real time what's happening in your market, because here I'm paying 300% more for lumber right now, but that's not true closer to the mills, right? Up towards Canada, there's folks paying a lot less than that. So, I mean, I know that's a loaded question, and that's like as good an answer as you're going to get, unless you got the worksheet right in front of you and you're doing the stuff we're talking about. And again, like I said, get into a community of other active investors and ask them what they're spending, ask them what they're paying for stuff.
So, that does lead me to my next question about when you're selecting a property to rehab, how important is it, and how do you select that property to make sure that there's enough ceiling there for you? I know that you have, it's that old adage, you don't want to be the most expensive property on the block.
Right. Yeah. Well, so on the buy side, your money's made when you buy, right? And then that profit is realized when you complete the project per the plan. But if you bought wrong, it doesn't matter. If you bought wrong, you're about to work for free for 3, 6, 12 months, depending on the scope of the project. And nobody wants to do that. So, I mean, the money's made on the front end. You got to buy it at a discount. That's just, if the seller's telling you that they're willing to sell to you because they want to circumvent commissions, like that's not a deal, right? Like they're just trying to not pay 5%, 6%, depending where you are in the country, to a realtor. That's not a deal. You have to be buying a deal where their motivations are deeper than that, where they need to go somewhere, they're in a hurry, they've got some other sort of underlying issues that you can help resolve for them. So you make your money on the buy side. What I would say on the sell side is look at what other investors are putting out, right? Look at the product that's being brought to market where you're about to do this project, and then just do whatever the next tier up home is, right? Say you're about to bring in our market, a 500 or a 550 house is pretty common, right? So if you have a 550 out sale, right, go look at the comps in the 7s, see what their fixtures and finishes look like, and then try and mimic some of those. I'm not saying build a 700 house or a 750 house like in place of a 500 or a 550, but if you want to be the best house at that price point, just steal a little bit from the 700 or the 750 house, right? Like spend the money where it matters. Look at the fixtures that they put in. Don't go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get the off the shelf crap, right? Order off Wayfair. Get something that's just that little bit nicer that'll differentiate your property from the other. And that'll be, and that'll go a long way in getting you to sell out from under them, right? You might not get more money necessarily. Maybe you'll get a bit more, but ideally you get yours sold quicker, and then velocity of money. You get to go to work a lot faster. So I think that was a good point, right? Like don't be the nicest, right? I'm using air quotes, house on the block in the sense that you over improved, but go and grab the handful of things that matter.
Sure. So, that leads me right into what are some of those things you've seen lately that are best bang for your buck? Some of those little upgrades that might make a big difference. Yeah,
trim. I mean, I argue that trim and tile sell a house. So in my experience, when I want to sell that 500, 550 house, for example, in our market, I'll go look at the 700, 750 house, and I'll look at what they did in the way of trim and tile. And I'll go and snag a couple of those things. Like if there's some really great mosaic or inlay in the shower stall, right? Don't just go with the traditional cheap glass Home Depot tile. Like if they spent a little bit more and they did something, significantly nicer, implement that, right? With regard to trim, shiplap, right? Now we're going back to the HGTV stuff. People are loving shiplap. They're loving matte black with stark like white Things like that have gone a long way for us. We finish all our closets. We don't just sell people an empty box, right? They walk into a closet, they can't envision what's going on in there. Like, so we do a custom built-in out of MDF in all our closets, in all our houses at all our price points. This is not a budget killer, you know? And what it does is it shows people that somebody cares. Somebody thought this through. This gives it that added little design flair. And to be fair, we have a designer, right? We give our canvas to the designer and we say, hey, this is the house, this is the price point. Give us those little pops of flair, right? Mm-hmm. We're not designers and we shouldn't be. As investors, that's not your job. Your job's to buy houses and raise capital, right? Buy right and raise capital. Put the people who are better than you at that thing in that position to succeed, and then empower them to do it and let them make those decisions. So again, I advocate for that highly. We have designers that do a lot of that, do all of that. They do all that selection for us.
Oh, trim is one of those things that we've learned too, is that, you know, you're picking up an older house and it's been painted a dozen times, but the trim has never been replaced. So, you know, there's little oversplashes and stuff. And trim is relatively an inexpensive thing to replace. But having that clean, freshly painted walls and then the nice white new trim, it really looks, it just makes it look so much better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It goes a long way. It's just clean. At the end of the day, you see a lot of those cosmetic rehabs and they just don't look clean, right? It's like, to your point, it's paint on top of paint on top of paint, right? Layers and layers of stuff. It's not cohesive. So yeah, spend that little bit. Like I said, we're not killing the budget with this stuff, but it's the differentiator. It's the reason we pre-sell about 60% of our stuff. Like there's a reason. It's our work product has gone on to speak for itself. At this point, people know what to expect in a De Silva Homes home. We also brand all of our projects. We don't flip under 123 Main Street LLC. We flip under the home builder brand. And that's another piece of advice for folks that are out there that are getting started. Like, you know, quickly step into that role. Don't just be any flipper, you know, one and dones under the name of that address, right? Like 123 Main Street LLC. It's a sole purpose entity. It buys this house. You cut corners, you do this cosmetic rehab, you sell it and you run, right? Like that's not a business model. That's very transactional. So to make it relational and to make this thing scalable, like you're a builder, right? Like brand it accordingly, put the sign in front of the house. People don't want to buy houses from flippers. They already know what to expect. So they buy houses from builders.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point too. So one of the things that we've experimented with lately is that, it sounds like you're kind of doing something a little different than we are, is that when I pick up a house and then we need to do any kind of flipping, we will test the market a little bit. We'll get the house and then do like a very fast cleanup and try to get it on the market as fast as possible, even if it's below that area's market value, to see if we could just do a quick sale as is. And then we let the market essentially dictate what we should do next. If it doesn't sell right away, then we know that we have to go in for a deeper rehab.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm not opposed to that model, honestly. The wholesale in our market, that's what we're doing. In some scenarios, like where demand is so crazy and you manage to lock up a deal that's in a super sought after market, velocity of money comes into play. Like I could make less, but do it faster and then turn those funds around and redeploy. So we wholesale as well. We'll take the deal down. We'll have it modeled as if we're going to do it. And we'll already start pre-selling it with renderings and, you know, the floor plans. We'll have the designers work up a material schedule. We'll have the architect do the layouts. In parallel, we're doing exactly what you guys are doing, which is testing the market, putting it out there. What we've found is in this last 12 months, or more now, people are willing to pay a premium. Home has become like super important to people and they're willing to pay the premium to do the work themselves. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we clean it out and we make it walkable, mortgageable, and then we put it on MLS as well. And then, yeah, we've had a bunch of really great wholesales.
Sure. So, this is always something that's always intrigues me is when you get you're starting your rehab and your project. How do you manage that project? I mean, you got a lot of people coming and going, and do you have like a template or here's a list of things that need to be done? How do you manage this project at the level that you are?
Yeah. So to systematically build and scale an operation that's not you dependent, which is, that's when it stops being a job and starts being a business. You have to get systematic. You have to put processes in place. And so, and what systems are just fancy words for lists. So all I did was create a list. And over the first, couple of years, everything I did, I wrote it down and started to see chronologically things are happening in a certain order. That's your process right there. So we've gone on to really beef that out. And so it's like, we call it our rehab milestone template. And we have a series of them depending on the scope of the project. Our new construction milestone template is 60 something steps. Like, it's a really robust list of things that have to happen in the order, they should be happening in. Also, we've got something we call the trade tracker. It's the order of operations for the tradesmen, for your vendors. Like, in what order do they come in? Where does your framer? Where does your mason? Where does your electrician? Where does your painter? Right? You're not going to paint a house before you frame a house. But a lot of people don't know that. They don't know the order. That one's actually pretty intuitive, but they don't necessarily know the order of operations. So we work from those. Those are the beating heart of our operations division. And so our in-house project manager reports to the office where the whiteboard that he works from, that's tracking his progress on all his individual projects. Right over that whiteboard are these trade tracker and milestone templates blown up and laminated, because they're that important. They are, like I said, they're the beating heart of our operations division, and they should be the beating heart of everybody else's. If they don't have a variation of that in their organization, it's a huge miss, because like, how many times are you going to make the same mistake before you say, wait a second, there's a system here. Like, this thing needs to happen in this order, so we're not spending this money or wasting this time again. And again, that's all available. I share all that in our group. So if folks go to the group there, they'll see it's actually in the files section. It's not it's proprietary in the sense that we gave it a name, but I encourage people to R&D, right? Rip off and duplicate, take the document, brand it accordingly, and put it on the wall in your office.
Sure. No, that'd be a great resource. We have been using an online tool. I think everybody's familiar with Asana, but a tool like that, I guess ClickUp is another one. Nifty is another one, where but you essentially can collaborate on the lists. And we've been able to use it to the point where, when some of our contractors have gotten used to it, if I need electrical work done, I essentially assign the electrician to that task, and we can collaborate and discuss that item right there in that tool. And then when the contractor's done, they can even take a snapshot and send it into Asana so I can mark it done. So yeah, that it definitely, those type of tools really have made things a lot easier for us.
Yeah, the software software for Slack, right, for inner team communication is powerful, to the tune of the stuff you're talking about, like the co-construct and the builder trend. There's so many, Asana and Monday, and there's tools out there. Like I advocate for the use of those in parallel. It's about the who, not the how necessarily. Like, who's going to be your point person on that thing? We got to a point where we realized we needed an admin to drive all the administrative and logistics, but then we needed a project manager to hold tradesmen accountable. And so, those two people working in parallel in a tool like the ones you're talking about is key. I mean, that's how you scale, just plain and simple. It's the only way you scale and keep your sanity.
Sure. Yeah. So, with COVID and everything, how has that changed your business, or is things going back to normal?
So early on in COVID, we stayed the course. We had deals under contract. We didn't bail. A lot of folks, like, here's an example, right? We were getting 1 or 2 wholesaler emails every day, every other day. We're getting these emails over the course of a month. As we get the pandemic hits, those emails just stop flowing. I'm like, where'd all these guys and girls go? Right? For us, we had deals under contract. I've never retraded in all my years doing this. COVID hits. We don't know where the market is going. I approach my sellers and say, listen, I've never done this. I'm asking to retrade. I'm asking for a 10% haircut on these because that's where the majority of the economists think the market is going to go. But frankly, nobody knows. But if I'll honor my commitment to buy these houses from you if you'll, give us a 10% discount. And you know what? They did, right? And then we buy the houses and 30 days later, we're selling these things on MLS for way more than we ever anticipated because the market rebounded in 30 days. And so those that stayed the course generated more momentum and kept going, while those who put their head in the sand, just survived. If they did that, a lot of them didn't even do that. So we thrived. My circle, the guys and girls in my world that, continued to operate through COVID, just pivoted where they needed to and kept going. We had our best year ever. And so did a lot of people in my circle. It's hard to believe because there's so much pain in the market, right? And I'm compassionate and I understand that not everybody had the best year ever, but we did, right? And a lot of people in my circle did because they just stayed the course, knew how to pivot, worked in parallel, worked in conjunction with others to figure out solutions and just thrived. And so here we are a little over a year later, coming off our best year ever, and now scaling into an even different space, right? Ready to take advantage of what's happening in these different asset classes. Commercial took a beating, right? Retail took a beating. Main Street is dead, right? You don't have to look very far. Just go downtown in your local town and you'll see, right? Do you not see a ton of vacancies? This is opportunity. And so that's where we are now. We're transitioning our value add construction heavy approach to single family rehabs. We're transitioning that into the commercial space because if you can flip a house, you can flip an office building, frankly.
Sure. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I'm hoping you're going to do one last couple things here for us. But again, to remind everybody, house flipping, the Fix and Flip Foundation. I'm sorry. I wrote down that house flipping spreadsheet and I read that instead. The Fix and Flip Foundation. Make sure you check out the Facebook group. But I always like to give people an actionable item, one actionable item that they should do right after listening to this show. What is that one actionable item? If they want to get into fix and flipping, what would you tell them that they have to do?
If they're new in their journey, the best place to start is YouTube University. And I know it's kind of cliche, but go to YouTube, type in The Build and watch those 16 episodes, right? Whatever you're binging on Netflix right now, put that on pause. And if you want to get into the fix and flip game, go watch The Build. Like I said, we don't monetize on it. There aren't even ads on it, frankly. You just watch it and just say, wow, this is what it actually looks like to do this day in and day out. I'm game or I'm not game, right? You'll quickly know. This is a very self-selecting business, right? You'll flip a house, and if you do really well, you'll likely flip more houses. If you don't do well, you'll go back to doing whatever it is that you do full time. So I say go there first if you're new to your journey, new in your journey. If you're a little bit further along and you've done a couple of deals, we have stuff outside of the Fix and Flip Foundation. We've got some courses and some other things that I can introduce folks to, depending on where they are in their journey. We host a mastermind for guys and girls that have been in the game for a while, that have scaled bigger businesses. So there's a lot of resources. Just kind of find your way into our world, the Fix and Flip Foundation world, and kind of look there and see what resonates with you. And I'm always available. I still right, I'm active on all the social medias at Real Gabe Da Silva. That's my handle, and that's me responding to messages. So I'm happy to communicate back and forth with your audience. Shoot me a message. Let me know what you're working on, what market you're in. I probably have resources that I can share with you, or I'd love to invite them to the Fix and Flip Foundation group on Facebook. That's a great place for people to kind of, a community for them to interact and start to get some momentum. In the end, you have to take action. You need to start generating some momentum. So do something, anything, just take action in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I can't recommend your series enough. In fact, I've had a couple people tell me, that they don't have time to watch a lot of that content. And then I give them a hard time because I saw on Facebook that they had just finished binge watching whatever episode of some series. Yeah. You people have the time for this. Come on. If you're serious about it, go watch the build and get some foundation.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to probably wrap things up here, but I'm going to ask one call of action here is, if you know somebody that is thinking about getting into fix and flipping, I ask you to hit pause and share this episode to them right now, because what Gabe has given us here is a flipping 101. And I really want this episode shared out to those people who would or are even considering doing this flipping. But my last question to you, Gabe, is if we covered a lot of ground here, but there's got to be a question you wished I would have asked you here today.
So it's good. It's actually a question I close my interviews with, and I ask other people, right? What did you used to believe that you no longer believe about a thing? So what did you used to believe about real estate investing that you no longer believe to be true? You can slice that question up a whole bunch of different ways. What did you used to believe about entrepreneurship that you no longer believe to be true? It's a sign that people are growing and learning. So I'd ask myself, what did you used to believe about the business of real estate before you got started that you no longer believe? And I no longer believe that we have any limitations in the way of resources. At the beginning, it's deals and money, and everybody can't figure out how to get either, and they're handcuffed and they just can't get out of their own way. The reality is resourcefulness trumps resources every day of the week. And if you think you can't get deals, you can't find deals, and you can't get dollars to do those deals, you're right. You won't find the deals. You won't find the dollars. But if you realize that you are more resourceful than you give yourself credit for, you'll find the deals and the dollars. I used to believe that it was a lack of resources. I've come to realize it's a lack of resourcefulness.
Well, I can't ask for a better way to conclude this conversation. Thank you so much, Gabe, and I hope we can chat again sometime.
Thanks, buddy. I look forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
This has been the REI Mastermind Network. You can already tell that we've made some changes, and a few more are on the way. If you are interested in what we have planned, head over to patreon.com/REI Mastermind and support the show today. Financial contributions are always appreciated, along with a like, share, and review. It really helps us grow and reach more people with this valuable information. See you next time, and tell a friend.